So welcome back everyone to the second half of this National Construction Code 2019 presentation. As Darryl just said, my name is John Lohman. I am also a Senior Plumbing Technical Advisor with the Victorian Building Authority. So this is my 5th year with the Building Authority in providing plumbing technical advice to industry and stakeholders such as yourselves being plumbers, it may be builders, building surveyors, whoever contacts the VBA Plumbing Technical Advice line via phone, email or face-to-face engagement like we are here today. As a plumber myself and having my own plumbing company for 25 years, plumbing sure has changed to what it was 30 years ago, which is why we're all here today, want a better understanding of new regulations and changes in standards. So hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll have that better understanding. Just before we get started, rather than yelling out your questions as Darryl just indicated, you do have presentation slide-out sheets. So if I could ask that you write down your questions as we go along, that'll ensure that we don't get disrupted, and plus it'll capture all your questions. So when it comes to question time, or us and the VBA experts, your questions can be answered. Okay, so the first part, performance solution. So just to give myself a bit of benefit, is kind of have a show of hands of plumbers who sort of don't understand a performance solution or never heard of it. So majority of you have heard of the performance solution. Do I need to elaborate a bit more on this topic before I get started? No? All right, I won't elaborate then. So this part of the presentation will cover off on how to develop a performance solution. So performance solutions are a way of encouraging new innovation, new solutions, new technology, by allowing practitioners the option of meeting the mandatory performance requirements of those not way covered in standards. To explain performance solution, the first half of this section of this presentation is intended to provide high-level overview on the performance solution pathway, and then we'll discuss how to collate all your performance solution documentation to create a performance solution. So before we discuss high-level overview, I'm just going to show you a short video. So the video is from the Australian Building Codes Board's website. So they oversee and actually write the national construction codes. So this is on their website. It's just giving you a guidance on performance solution.
The National Construction Code, also known as the NCC, is the minimum standard of safety, health, amenity and sustainability for buildings across Australia. The NCC is a performance-based code which includes performance requirements. These mandatory performance requirements are supported by the general requirements in the NCC. The mandatory performance requirements set the minimum level that buildings, building elements and plumbing systems must achieve. For example, a performance requirement could be: a building must be protected from the spread of fire and smoke to allow sufficient time for the orderly evacuation of the building in an emergency. Or a performance requirement could be: installations intended to supply cold water for human consumption, food preparation, food utensil washing, or personal hygiene must be connected to a drinking water supply. These would be part of the performance requirements you would need to comply with to meet the NCC and obtain your building approval. There are two options to satisfy the performance requirements: a deemed to satisfy solution or a performance solution. The deemed to satisfy solution follows a set recipe of what, when, and how to do something. A deemed to satisfy solution uses the deemed to satisfy provisions from the NCC. A performance solution is unique for each individual situation. These solutions are often flexible in achieving the outcomes and encouraging innovative design and technology use. A performance solution directly addresses the performance requirements. A deemed to satisfy solution or a performance solution can be used to satisfy the performance requirements. When designing buildings, the choice is yours.
Okay. So as highlighted in the video, The Plumbing Code of Australia contains high-level technical requirements for plumbing work which are described as performance requirements. Essentially, performance requirements specify the level of your performance or objective that your plumbing installation must meet. So on the screen here is an example of a cold water service performance requirement. So under BP 1.2 of the chapter covering cold water services, it includes section covering the design, construction, installation, which requires them to be provided at the appropriate flow rates and pressures, installed to allow access for maintenance and testing, and use water efficiently. So this is what a mandatory performance requirement in the Plumbing Code of Australia is for a cold water service installation. So the question is, how do I meet the performance requirement? So there are three ways to meet a performance requirement. The first way is the most common way, and I guarantee a lot of practitioners here today would be using deemed to satisfy. So the deemed to satisfy describes how to meet the performance requirement. So deemed to satisfy for the previous slide would be Australian New Zealand Standard 3500 Part 1 for your cold water services. The second method is a performance solution. And then your third method is a combination of both. So you're extracting data or calculations from a standard, incorporating that into your performance solution documentation to achieve the performance requirement. At the end of the day, it's up to the practitioner to decide which is most appropriate for their job. We'll now look at the key principles on the performance solution. So a plumber must decide in advance that they are going to carry out a performance solution. It isn't something you just decide partway through an installation. Performance solution are not an excuse for non-compliant. For this reason, the performance solution must be intentional, for therefore it must be designed and planned in advance. As a reminder, a performance solution cannot be used to vary at a watermark. So watermark is consolidated into the Plumbing Code of Australia. Practitioners must complete all the relevant documentation prior to commencing their work. All documentation must be retained for a minimum of 10 years along with your compliance certificate. Practitioners will need to be satisfied with their performance solution because ultimately you'll be responsible as soon as you certify that compliance certificate. Also, if you're going to complete or install a performance solution on new construction or a new build such as a house, and you'll have an existing or an approved building permit associated with that house, and let's say you're going to alter that building permit by doing a performance solution, strongly suggest to engage the building surveyor because you come to the end of the job and the building surveyor will not sign off that certificate of occupancy because you may have or you will be altering that approved building permit. So make sure you engage your building surveyor prior to installing your performance solution. So the following stages need to be taken to demonstrate that your performance solution will meet the performance requirements of the PCA. So these are just summarised versions of the VBA information guide on how to develop a performance solution. So the first stage is to prepare all necessary document for your performance solution. The second stage is to carry out your performance solution according to the design. And then the third stage is when your installation is complete, you must identify this on the compliance certificate. So the first stage of the performance solution is getting all the relevant documentation together. So documentation is a key part of your performance solution. It must contain the following information to comply with the Plumbing Code of Australia. The document must identify the address of the work, describe the scope, its purpose, why it's required, and the type of plumbing work. Identify which performance requirements are applicable to your performance solution. To prove your performance solution meets the performance requirements, you must have it assessed for one of the assessment methods in the PCA. So this is a method of demonstrating compliance. The documentation will also need to describe the proposed performance solution and include some form of analysis calculations, test results to prove that it will meet the performance requirements. So all this forms a report for each performance solution. So we'll now look briefly at different ways of demonstrating that your proposed performance solution will meet the performance requirements of the PCA. This is also known as the assessment method. So under the PCA, if a performance solution is proposed, it must be shown to meet the performance requirements, or at least be equivalent to the deemed to satisfy provisions. To demonstrate this, you will need to use one or more of the assessment method available in the PCA. So these are obtaining a certificate from a recognised expert or a professional engineer certifying the performance solution, supplying any other form of documentary evidence to demonstrate your performance solution meets the performance requirements of the PCA, using a verification method prescribed in the PCA, or comparing a proposed performance solution to a deemed to satisfy provision. So the VBA do not make informal or individual determinations on who may call themselves a recognised expert. A recognised expert should be a person with a level of expertise that will be consistent to the complexity of the plumbing installation. A licensed plumber could be a recognised expert. It would depend on your experience and your knowledge. This is a judgment that you'd have to make. Another example of a qualified expert could be a fire engineer in fire protection work. So at the end of the day, the responsible plumber will need to sign off on the work, so you need to be confident that the recognised expert you choose is the appropriate one. So no matter which assessment method you choose, your documentation should contain evidence that the performance solution has been analysed and approved by a suitably qualified person. Examples of testing are listed on the slide. Some of you may be familiar with the various test reports completed by a number of roofing manufacturing companies for eave gutter designs. So this would be an example of testing work completed in a recognised facility. So similar to the one on the screen on testing on site or recognised in a laboratory. So practitioners do not have to undertake all assessment methods for every performance solution. You simply need to choose which is most appropriate for your job. So that was a bit of high overview level of the performance solution pathway. We'll now discuss a more example in relating to how to do your documentation requirements and what is needed as a minimum. For this example, we have used performance solution for eave gutter overflows. So as described earlier, the performance solution report will need to include the address of where the work is to be carried out. So in the example on the screen, it's 733 Burke Street in Docklands. The documentation will need to describe the scope, which is what we covered by the work. So our example, we have provided the scope will be installed eave gutters using Acme gutters. If there's any limitations associated with, they should also be attached here as well. So let's say Acme indicate you can only use their eave gutter bracketing system and spacing of 1 metre apart as maximum. The report should describe why it's required or its purpose. So in other words, why are we doing this performance solution? For this site, the owner does not want a 10mm gap and would like a lesser gap between the fascia and the gutter. So therefore, the solution would not meet the requirements of Australian New Zealand Standard 3500 Part 3 Appendix G as a deemed to satisfy document. So the type of plumbing work should specify which class of plumbing work the performance solution relates to. In this case, it will be roofing work and particular eave gutter overflow provisions. So you need to identify the relevant performance requirements in the PCA that the performance solution will be used for. So in this case, it's the Plumbing Code of Australia 2019, VIC Section F. Now the reason why it's VIC is because it's roofing. Roofing is plumbing work in Victoria, other states and territories. Some of them do not have roofing as regulated plumbing work, so it's a VIC variation and it's positioned at the rear of the document. So it's VIC Section F, which relates to your stormwater and drainage system, and specifically VIC FP 1.1 for your roofing drainage systems, and VIC FP 1.2 for your overflow provisions. So under the method of demonstrating compliance, the report will need to describe how the performance solution has been proven to meet the performance requirements. So in this example, Acme Gutters engaged a professional engineering firm called Specialised Engineering Proprietary Limited to conduct research, run tests and analysis on the Acme Gutter systems to demonstrate the design and installation procedures will meet the overflow provisions. So the documentation will also include a certification from a relevant engineer to certify that Acme Gutters will meet the overflow provisions if designed and is installed in accordance with the proposed performance solution. So the report will need to describe what the proposed performance solution is used for this installation. So this will include any calculation procedures and any limitations. So the calculation procedure is the most critical part of the performance solution. As every site is different, such as your rainfall intensity, your roof catchment area, or your length of roof shedding from gutter to ridge. Plumbers must ensure their calculations are derived from relevant tables and charts from the manufacturer's test report. For example, so let's say we have two houses in the same street would have the same full rainfall intensity. The house on the right, on the left, would have let's say it's an 80 square metre of roofing catchment area. The length of gutter or length of roofing from gutter to ridge is 6 metres in length. The house on the right, let's say it's 100 square metres of roofing catchment area, and the length of roofing from gutter to ridge is 8 square metres or 8 metres in length. Let's say we calculate all our calculations derived from the manufacturer's test report, and we come to a maximum 7 metres of length of gutter of roofing. So therefore, it'll be compliant to the house on the left because it'll be 6 metres. It steps outside the limitations of the house on the right because we're over this 7 metre length of roof. So the documentation will need to include the test result analysis showing how the proposed performance solution will meet the relevant performance requirement. So as you see on the screen, this is an example from a manufacturer's test report. Some plumbers are on the understanding that the manufacturer is indicating that this is your performance solution documentation. This is only part of your performance solution. As I indicated in the previous example, you're extracting data from this test report. So this test report is going to ensure that your performance solution is applicable for that job. It's not always applicable to every job, so you need to do your calculations to make sure it is for the job that you're going to be installing. So the second stage is to carry out the installation. So when doing so, you must follow the design as set out in the performance documentation prepared in stage 1. So remember I indicated that your eave gutter bracketing system must be a maximum of 1 metre apart. If you install it at 1.1, you're stepping outside the limitations of that design. So make sure you stay within the limitations of that design. So the third stage is to describe your work when you're completed on your compliance certificate. So if your work is carried out under the performance solution or uses a combination of performance solution and deemed to satisfy, you must tick the box on the performance solution on your compliance certificate. If the box is not ticked on the compliance certificate, the VBA will assume that it's deemed to satisfy. So therefore, treat any deviation as non-compliant. And remember, your compliance certificate along with your documentation on your performance solution must be retained for 10 years. So in addition to selecting the tick box in your performance solution, you must identify under the details section and the appliance product information on the compliance certificate. So the product you're using and what you're going to detail on the certificate regarding your performance solution details. So under the installation details, if we look on the screen, we'll see work does that the performance solution apply to. So in other words, what is the scope? As we all know, the performance solution is relating to the eave gutter overflow provisions, and that's what we're going to write on that in that position. The next is in the green, the relevant performance requirements, and as indicated before, for roofing, we're referring to the back of the document, so that's why it's VIC. So the performance requirements in VIC section F Stormwater and drainage systems, so VIC FP 1.1 for your roof drainage systems, and VIC FP 1.2 for your overflow provisions. In the blue, the assessment method used. So as we know, Acme Gutter engaged a professional engineer. So we're going to indicate on the certificate certification from a professional engineer assessment method. And then in the purple, the version of the PCA. So we're using the current version, which is the Plumbing Code of Australia 2019. In the appliance product information section, we're going to indicate what type of product we use. So it's Acme Gutters that we've actually used, and the model number. So the model number could be a quad gutter, it could be a mini line gutter, whatever type of guttering system you're going to be using, that's what you need to identify in that location. Insurance. If you're going to do a performance solution, you want to ensure you're going to be covered. If you're unsure, you need to engage your insurance company. You don't want to have a couple of years down the track and find out that you're not covered. So if you're very unsure or you don't understand whether you're covered or not, engage your insurance company. So that concludes the key stages and requirements on how to develop a performance solution. If you're going to carry out a performance solution and you're unsure, you may need to do some research. ABCB do have that video that you've just seen there before. Also, they do have fact sheets and guidance on their website. The VBA do have an industry guide. It's actually in your handout backs. And also there's a YouTube video on their website as well, giving you steps on how to develop a performance solution. Also, you can contact the VBA Plumbing Technical Advice Line on 1300 815 127. You can speak to myself or either one of the other plumbing technical advisors with the VBA to give you a bit more understanding if you're not sure. Okay, so our next topic is plumbing modification changes. I'll get it out in a minute. Some of you may have attended the Plumbing Regulations 2018 seminars last year. So one of the changes that was made to the regulations relating to sanitary drains passing under buildings to serve other buildings, provided the limitations within Schedule 2 of the plumbing regulations were complied with. So in Clause 3.2 of 3500 Part 2 requires that all sanitary drains under buildings only serve fixtures within that buildings. So this is why the new Schedule 2 is now enforced, or can do it under that Schedule 2. So it also notes that the drains should be located external to the building where practical. However, this requirement can be difficult to comply with, such as your block of land being subdivided or your properties built right up to the boundary. In the past, plumbers would apply to the VBA for a plumbing modification to exempt from complying with Clause 3.2. So the VBA would normally approve the exception subject to a number of conditions. So these conditions are now consolidated into the Plumbing Regulations Schedule 2. Provided the limitations are complied with, you no need to longer apply to the VBA for a modification. So if we look on the screen, I'll try to get the mouse to give you a bit of understanding. Ain't going to work. There it is. Okay, so we're referring to the one in the blue. So in particular, what we're referring to is the drain passing under the building to serve another, so what's shaded in the yellow. So the limitations within Schedule 2 are that drain must be a straight line of drain with no junctions or bends going underneath that building. The material you're using, there it is, the material you're using must be compliant to the 3500 Part 2. Inspection openings to surface level, entry and exit of the building in a permanently accessible position. So if you follow the limitations of Schedule 2, you no longer need to apply for a VBA modification. Let's say that drain run diagonally across here. Again, provided the limitations are complied with, so if you've got an OO over here, you'll be deemed compliant with Schedule 2. Let's say the drain had a bend, say here, going across there. So now you're stepping outside the limitations of Schedule 2. You either do it as a performance solution or you apply to the VBA for a VBA modification. Let's say the sewer point was positioned here. and let's say the existing drain was here. It's going to be practical to go around that building. This is not a way for convenience or cost saving. If it's practical to go around the building, you must go around the building. Okay, so the next section covers some common plumbing audit issues the VBA has identified and how to avoid them. So this slide shows the number of compliance certificates audit have conducted in February 2019. As you can see, 1,035 audits conducted by the VBA, 12% failed the audit. Looking at the financial year, the percentage of failed audits account for 19% in total, which is pretty significant. This means almost 1 in 5 completed jobs failed an audit in some way. So, top 3 causes of audit failures. So number 1, failing to provide the minimum clearance between the highest part of the burner and the range hood or exhaust fan. So in this case, manufacturer's specifications takes precedent. If the manufacturer of the cooktop specifies a 650 clearance and the range hood manufacturer specifies a 700, whatever the greatest distance takes precedent. As per the manufacturer of the range hood specifications, a 700 clearance must be achieved. Let's say the manufacturers are silent or they don't specify a clearance. Well, then we're referring to Australian New Zealand Standard 5601 Part 1. So as the measurement is from the highest part of the periphery of the burner to the underside of the range hood, which is a minimum of 600 mil. Number 2, failing to install appropriate overflow provisions to eave gutters. Again, if there's potential for water to enter back into the building, it's a mandatory performance requirement in VIC FP 1.2 that overflow provisions must be provided. Whether you do it as a DTS, so your 3500 Part 3, or you do it as a performance solution, it's your choice, but you must provide overflow provisions if there's potential for water to enter back into that building. Number 3, failing to install appropriate marked toughened safety glass splashbacks behind the gas burners or cooktops. Again, let's say you're working on a new house and it's a new install. The minimum thickness of the glass must be 5 mil. It must be labelled toughened safety glass. If it's not labelled toughened safety glass, it must be certified to an Australian New Zealand Standard 2208. If you have documentation from the manufacturer, well then you'll be deemed as being compliant. You want to be cautious if you're going to put that plate in if you haven't got any documentation to prove that it's toughened safety glass and to an Australian New Zealand Standard 2208. Rain heads, another common issue. So the VBA has identified a number of common issues associated with rain heads when installed in roof drainage work. So these common issues are incorrect overflow, incorrect discharge, and incorrect height. If we look at the one on the right, don't know where the mouse. If we look at this one, we can see that the rain head, the overflow is positioned up here. If you look at the box gutter, it's coming way down here. The overflow, that looks small, it's probably not sized correctly. If that downpipe is going to block, I don't think it's going to come out of the overflow provision. It's probably going to go back down the gutter and back into the building. If we look at the next slide, this is a compliant installation according to HB 39 and Australian New Zealand Standard 3500 Part 3. So the rated installation need to have the overflow provisions where the highest part of the overflow weir of any rain head must be at least 25 mil lower than the sole of the box gutter. So this is a compliant installation according to HB 39 and Australian New Zealand Standard 3500 Part 3. Another issue relates to gas fitters not commissioning procedures for a new gas appliance installation. Specifically, the VBA has found gas fitters are not carrying out negative pressure and carbon dioxide spilling testing in accordance with 5601 Appendix R. Now you've got to remember, commissioning is a mandatory requirement when you do that, a gas appliance installation. Negative pressure is also mandatory and so is carbon dioxide. A lot of you would have completed, gas fitters would have completed that testing module that VBA had out last year. You would all have that link. You can always click on that link, go back and watch some videos all again if you're unsure on how to do a negative pressure test and carbon monoxide spillage test. Also, as Paul mentioned, VBA, ESV do have videos on their websites, as well as information sheets and giving you guidance how to carry out negative pressure and carbon monoxide testing. And that Paul has also mentioned sheet 38 on the ESV website. You can use that if you're servicing gas appliances. It's been updated. You can use that sheet. Okay. So this section will cover off some common plumbing issues that the VBA has encountered during its investigations. So this slide is derived from the amount of complaints the VBA has received. It shows some statistics, a number of plumbing investigations that are handled by 15 VBA investigators for the past few months. So the pie chart to the right shows the outcomes of these investigations. The vast majority, 85% of investigations, results in the rectified by the plumber with no further action. A small number are referred to either the magistrate court for disciplinary inquiries, around about 8% for plumbers. Mainly cases for relating to unlicensed or unregistered persons carrying out plumbing work represent about 2%. For minor breaches, the responsible plumber may be issued with a warning letter. There are about 5% cases. This will depend on the circumstances, but will only be issued for minor breaches. So here are common issues that the VBA investigations have identified. So the first one is case number 1. It relates to unlicensed and unregistered persons carrying out plumbing work. So under section 221D of the Act is an offence with a maximum fine of up to $80,595 in 2018 and 2019 respectively. The amount of fines handed down to the courts will depend by the severity of the case. A recent example was a person who contracted to install hot and cold water installation in a bathroom renovation in 2016. The complaint was raised to the VBA by the property owner when they became aware that the persons carrying out the work were unlicensed and or unregistered. Following investigations, the VBA brought the matter to the Magistrates Court. The court found the person guilty of charge and fined him $4,000 plus $1,000 in costs. So this is an example of a successful prosecution because the property owner was able to identify the work carried out by that person. Just grab a drink. Okay, case number 2, or example number 2. This is another issue that came to the VBA's attention. It relates to a licensed plumber directing an unlicensed or unregistered person to carry out plumbing work. So under section 221G of the Act is an offence for this to occur with a maximum fine of up to $8,059.50 in 2018-2019. A recent example was a person carrying out roof work in a new estate. The person had completed his apprenticeship but failed to register himself with the VBA. The VBA investigating officers were carrying out licence and registration checks in the area when they identified these 2 breaches. The person in question was prosecuted in the Magistrate Court and fined $1,000, plus costs for carrying out plumbing work while being unregistered. In addition, the licensed plumber who directed him to carry out the plumbing work was also brought before an internal panel inquiry. The panel found the licensed plumber guilty of charge and fined him $806 plus costs. So it's important to know for practitioners who employ people to carry out plumbing work to ensure they are appropriately qualified to carry out plumbing work. And also apprentices, so when you finish your time, make sure you register yourself with the VBA. Case example number 3. So another common issue seen by the VBA plumbing investigations relates to work that does not comply with standards, including poor workmanship. So under section 221FA of the Act, plumbing work must comply with the Act and also with the plumbing regulations. A recent example relates to the installation of a solar water heater which fell off a roof due to the system not being appropriately secured. The matter came to the VBA's attention via complaint and investigation followed. The VBA took action and referred the matter to the Magistrate Court in 2018, where the matter was proven. The offending plumber was fined $2,500 in this instance. Homeowner also made a claim against the plumber's insurance for the defective work and did not want the plumber back on site. So the insurance claim would likely impact on the plumber's insurance premium in the future. So case number 4 example, under section 221E(1) of the Act, a person must not carry out any work that they are not licensed to do when it requires a certificate of compliance. Example of this issue relates to work of a registered plumber working unsupervised and outside the scope of their qualification. The plumber had carried out roofing work in 2 commercial factories. When the issue came to the VBA's attention after a complaint was lodged regarding roof leaks. Subsequently, investigations by the VBA found multiple instances of defective work as well as breaches of the Act, where the plumber was not working under supervision of a licensed plumber in the same class of work. So the matter went to the Magistrate Court in 2018, where the plumber was fined $20,000. A conviction was recorded and he was ordered to pay costs. It's a very significant outcome on this one. So if you've seen illegal or non-compliant work, you can advise the VBA by lodging a complaint. To do so, just visit the VBA website, click on the VBA 360, you're probably all familiar with that, it's circled there on the red in the screen. You can also lodge a complaint at the VBA office. When lodging a complaint, the more information you can provide, such as photos, videos, dates, times, the more chance of a successful prosecution.